Have you ever been to the doctor and wondered how they can figure out so much about what's going on inside your head, sometimes without any fancy equipment at all? It can feel a little bit like they're reading your mind, but it's really just pure, elegant science at work.
I mean, seriously, think about that. We have these incredible MRI machines, CAT scans, all this high-tech stuff, and yet, a good neurologist can get a shockingly clear picture of your brain's health with just their hands, maybe a little rubber hammer, and a few really clever questions. So, how on earth is that possible? Well, the answer is an incredible process called the neurological exam.
So what is it exactly? The neurological exam isn't just one test. It's a whole series of them, and each one is specifically designed to check on a different part of your nervous system. We're talking the brain, the spinal cord, and all the nerves that branch out from there. You can really think of it as a physical, but for your mind and all its wiring. To really get a handle on how this all works, we're going to frame it as a tour. Imagine the brain is a big corporate headquarters. We're going to make 4 stops at some of the most important departments, and at each stop, we'll see how a few simple tests can tell a doctor if everything's running the way it should be. Okay, our first stop is the C-suite, the executive office. We're talking about the frontal lobe. This is the CEO of your brain, sitting right there behind your forehead, and it's in charge of all the big-picture, high-level decisions.
And believe me, this CEO has a ton on its plate. The frontal lobe is responsible for your ability to plan ahead, to solve tricky problems, and, this is a huge one, to control your impulses. You know, stopping yourself from saying or doing something you shouldn't. It's where your personality lives, and it even organizes complex sequences of movement, like just getting yourself dressed in the morning. So you can see how a problem here could really mess up your day-to-day life.
That really is the big question, right? How can you possibly test something as complicated as impulse control? You'd think you'd need some supercomputer, but nope. All you need is a really simple and, frankly, really clever little test.
This is called the go-no-go test, and its genius is in how simple it is. First, the doctor sets up a basic rule. I tap once, you tap once. They do this a few times to get a rhythm going. Then comes the switch. Okay, now, do not tap when I tap twice. A healthy frontal lobe can easily slam on the brakes and stop that automatic urge to tap. But if there's damage, the patient might just keep tapping anyway, because that impulse control, it's just not there. Here's another fantastic example. The doctor might test abstract thought by just asking you to explain a common saying. Someone with a healthy frontal lobe will get the metaphor. You know that other people's situations always look better than your own. But a person with a frontal lobe injury, they might take it completely literally. They might say, oh, it means their sprinkler works better. They lose that ability to think abstractly, which is a huge red flag for the brain's CEO.
All right, let's move on. Our next stop on the tour is the brain's navigation department, the parietal lobe. This is located kinda toward the back and top of your head.
The parietal lobe has a really cool job. It's constantly taking in all this information from your senses, what you're seeing, what you're feeling, what you're touching, and it's weaving all of that together into a seamless 3D map of the world around you. It tells you where you are in space, where other things are, and it even helps with skills like math and writing.
Now, this is where it gets super specific and kind of wild. If a very particular part of the parietal lobe gets damaged, it can cause this bizarre collection of symptoms called Gerstmann syndrome. All of a sudden, a person can't do basic math, they can't write properly, they get their right and left mixed up, and they can't even identify their own fingers. It's just a perfect, fascinating example of how specific jobs are assigned to tiny little parts of the brain.
But maybe the most mind-bending parietal lobe problem is something called hemi-neglect. Just look at this slide. A doctor asks a patient to copy a drawing of a star. A patient with damage to their right parietal lobe will only draw the right half of the star. And here's the craziest part. They have no idea that anything is missing. To them, the drawing is perfect. It's not a problem with their eyes. Their brain is literally ignoring the entire left side of the universe.
Okay, our tour is moving right along to the temporal lobes. These are on the sides of your head, roughly behind your temples. Think of this department as the brain's central archives. It's the library, the memory banks, and the language processing center all rolled into one. So, how do you see if the archives are in good working order? Well, a classic test is all about memory. The doctor might give you 5 totally unrelated words to remember. But here's the key. They don't ask you for them right away. They distract you for a good 5 minutes with other tests. Then they'll say, okay, what were those 5 words? This doesn't just test if you heard them, it tests if your brain was able to properly file them away into recent memory, which is a core job of the temporal lobe.
The temporal lobe is also where you'll find a critical language center called Wernicke's area. If this spot gets damaged, a person can develop what's called Wernicke's aphasia. Now, this is fascinating. They can speak perfectly fluently, with normal grammar and rhythm, but the words that come out are complete nonsense. It's often called a word salad. They've lost the connection between words and their meaning, which also means they can't understand what other people are saying to them.
All right, for our last stop on the tour, we're heading down to the basement to check the building's fundamental wiring. This is the autopilot system that controls movement and reflexes. We're talking about the brainstem, the spinal cord, and all the nerves that connect out to your muscles.
I'm sure every single one of you has had this done. The doctor takes out that little rubber hammer, taps your knee, and your leg kicks out. Well, those are called deep tendon reflexes, and they're not just for fun. Each reflex is like a little circuit test for a specific level of your spinal cord. So by tapping your bicep, your knee, or your ankle, a doctor can do a super quick and efficient check to make sure the signals are getting down the spinal cord and back out to the muscles without any issues. But out of all the reflexes, maybe the most important is the plantar response. Here's how it works. The doctor takes a sharp object and strokes the bottom of an adult's foot. Normally, your toes should curl downward. But if there's a problem on the main highway between the brain and the spinal cord, you get something called a positive Babinski sign. The big toe shoots up and the other toes fan out. That one simple response is a massive clue that there's a serious problem somewhere higher up in the central nervous system. And just like that, our tour is over. We've gone from the CEO's office all the way down to the basic wiring. And we've seen how these really simple, low-tech tests can systematically check in on the most complex machine in the known universe. You know, it's just such an elegant system when you stop and think about it. Every single test is basically a question that the doctor is asking a specific part of your nervous system. Hey, frontal lobe, are you making good judgments? Hey, parietal lobe, do you know where we are? Hey, temporal lobe, are you storing these memories correctly? And the answers don't come back in words. They come back in the tap of a finger, the drawing of a star, or the curl of a toe. And that really leaves us with this one big final thought. This whole exam is just a profound reminder that our deepest thoughts, our cherished memories, our very sense of who we are, it's all grounded in physical wiring that can be tested and understood. It just beautifully bridges that mysterious gap between the mind we experience and the body we live in, showing us just how deeply and intricately they're connected.